Welcome to Chronic Curiosity, where real people have real conversations, driven by curiosity to discuss this life in hopefully an intriguing way. Social media and the internets have woven their way into our lives and psyche, so we'd like to slow it down and be genuine and enjoy this foreign thing called conversation. Like, most of the time, I don't even know what we're going to talk about. We may highlight things our guests have going on, or it may just be us, Tony, Cass, and myself. Often our conversations can swing from one topic to the next: relationships to conspiracies, mental health to ancient civilizations, politics to aliens. But if you're curious enough, they can all connect. The one thing we'll certainly like to do is to connect with you, the listener, by discussing things that you can connect with and discussing things that make you curious enough that you didn't think you could connect with. So we hope you enjoy your time with us and appreciate the time you're spending with us, because we understand that that's one thing you can spend but never make more. In addition, if you do enjoy our show, we hope you could take a minute to show your support. Following and liking our channel on whatever platform you're listening to is greatly appreciated, and it doesn't cost you anything except the calories to, clickety-click. And remember, share it with a friend. We love growing this network and hearing from everybody. We also have a website that's linked in the description, chronic-curiosity.com. That's a store where you can pick up some fun, curious merchandise, not to mention some of the most comfortable and curious t-shirts ever, as well as a donate button if you just want to help us and support the show. We appreciate your ears and interaction. Thank you once again. Welcome to Chronic Curiosity. Open mind required. Raw human interaction. Inevitable. And here we go. All right. Should be good to go. Good?
Mm-hmm. I think
Good.
so.
Good. All right. I'm running things. Yeah. We're good.
Coolio.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to start by saying happy birthday yesterday.
Thank you.
Big 35. Well, you know what? We can cheers to that because we didn't cheer to that yesterday. I'm glad you were born.
Me too. And then I'm going to, this chair is broken. You see me sinking down?
No.
I guess we're technical difficulties.
Please edit all that out.
That's all right. That's me. No, this is real. Real life.
Here we go. All right.
Real life. I will say second to that. I would like to cheers to you for 20 years.
Do we get another drink for that? Because
absolutely. Yes,
yeah,
we absolutely do. 20 years. Yes, absolutely. So, if you could, how do you feel about just telling the story?
Yeah.
From the start.
Yeah. Give me some bumper sides if I veer off, and
Please do.
Yeah. Okay, so what was Tuesday? The August 10th, I think. So 20 years ago, August 10th, sports physical for 8th grade basketball. Went in, see my pediatrician, which was the office that my mom worked at as a nurse. And, you pee in the cup and, boys cough and you do the physical things. And my mom had went into the bathroom just to use it after they dipped my urine just for routine, no symptoms. I was perfectly happy, healthy, thin, active. And she noticed that the nurse had wrote down that my glucose was normal, but my strip was still sitting there, and it showed that my glucose was not normal. There was a lot of glucose in my urine. But sometimes if you leave strips sitting there for too long, the color will change, much like the strips that we put in the pool for to check everything. And so she asked if we could recheck it because she noticed that it was reading, and it came back still elevated. So, not knowing any of this, like I'm 12, I had to go to the lab and drink this disgusting soda flavor syrup. And then we left. We went school shopping, and my mom got a call, I don't know, that afternoon, and said that my blood sugar was extremely elevated, and I had to come back into the office. I don't know what any of this means. I just know that my mom is crying, and we leave. We're like in the mall, and we leave. And I go back to the doctor, and they tell me that I'm type 1 diabetic.
At the age of
12. It was a month before I turned 13. So this was 2001. I didn't even know what those words meant, right? My mom's a nurse. I feel like maybe I should have, but I didn't know anything. So we spent, I don't know, when you're 12, your timeline is a little off, but didn't seem like a very long amount of time with an endocrinologist and his nurse. And of course, it's like almost after hours. It's 4:30. And this is how you check your blood sugar. And here's 2 different kinds of insulin. And this is how you're going to give yourself a shot. But, your mom's a nurse, so you guys can take care of that fine. And, here's some symptoms to look out for. And we were pretty much pushed out the door. Being a nurse in family practice, when that happens, we send people to a specialist, right? We don't dive into a lot of that. So my mom was just completely overwhelmed. I still didn't know what was going on to even be upset, right? I just know that I'm going to have to give myself shots for the rest of my life. It's pretty much all I could focus on, could comprehend. So I just remember there were a lot of tears. My dad, when he gets scared, he gets angry, right? He expresses it very much how I do. So there was a lot of harsh conversations, or not harsh, like maybe not even hysteria, just, why? What is going on? Like, how does this happen? What are we supposed to do? Because we don't know, right? So, yeah. So that night, my mom gave me my first insulin shot that now I realize was long-acting insulin that was supposed to, last 24 hours. So every night I got a shot of my long-acting insulin, and I went to bed.
right. So to break some of that down a little bit, it's like you said, 20 years since you've been diagnosed with type 1 at the age of 12. It means you're getting old.
So old.
So old.
I'm still younger than you.
But also, you touched on the fact that your mom was a nurse at the time and had been. And she was overwhelmed by the situation. Rightfully so, I'm sure. And not those two things can be exclusive or, separated. And then also that your dad appears to be angry when he gets scared or nervous. He, and this is just me speaking from my own experience, shares emotions with others differently than most people would expect. Maybe not expect, but once you get to know him, you see the feeling. It may not represent what it seems like, but and also that you are a nurse.
Yes.
How long have you been a nurse for?
It will be 13 years in October. So 2009, I graduated from nursing school.
So you have some background in the medical field at
A little
this
bit.
point, obviously.
A little bit.
And I just want to touch on that piece too of, your mom was a nurse and she was overwhelmed and, obviously probably overwhelmed because of, you being her daughter. But it seems like there was a lack of follow-up or sense of caring or bedside manner at the time. But we can get into it obviously a little more later too, but I do want to bring that point across that, not everyone's a specialist in certain fields. So there seems to be some kind of disconnect sometimes when we, see our doctors. So, but,
yeah.
So that was the first night you had to give yourself insulin, or
My
your mom.
My mom did it. She did my finger stick, which if you know absolutely nothing about diabetes, especially type 1, if you hear the word diabetes, you're usually, or whoever is speaking generally is talking about type 2 diabetes, which is a very big difference between type 1. Type 2 is your pancreas is making insulin, which insulin is like the key to taking energy that you've consumed and allowing it to get into the cells that it needs to go into your body. So
specifically carbohydrates.
Yeah, so anything that gets broken down into glucose, so eventually fats and some proteins. But so without that key, all of the glucose stays in the bloodstream. So patients with type 2 diabetes, for whatever reason, their pancreas just can't keep up with the amount of carbs in their body. Now, that could be because of, it's just not working at its max capacity. It could be because of diet. A lot of type 2 diabetics are overweight. There's a stigma with diabetes, that you ate too much sugar or you ate too many carbs and whatever. But the big difference between type 1 and type 2 is type 1, which is what I have. For some reason, my body attacked its beta cells in my pancreas. So my immune system thought that it was something else and attacked itself. So my beta cells that produce insulin, when I was diagnosed, I was making a little bit of insulin. So I didn't have any symptoms. So I didn't have to be admitted to the hospital. I don't even know what my blood sugar was at diagnosis. Enough for them to say you're diabetic. I produced insulin for about a year, 9 months to a year after I was diagnosed. But my body attacked itself. Therefore, I couldn't produce the insulin that I needed. So without the outside source of insulin, which is what we give in our injections or our insulin pumps, I would not survive. So I left knowing I had to give myself injections, and without it, I would not survive. And it would be lifelong. It's pretty much what I could comprehend as a 12-year-old. But my mom had to work the next day, and it was a Saturday. And so she went to work. I'm sure she was up and my blood sugars. I don't remember any of that. I do remember going and getting breakfast with my dad. And I remember pulling into the parking lot and knowing what my blood sugar is. And in order to give yourself the appropriate amount of insulin, you have to know how many carbs you're going to eat. But you also have to know how your body responds to the amount of insulin per carbs. I haven't ever done this before. So the first however long was just a guessing game. All right, well, if you have 30 carbs, you're going to take 3 units of insulin and just record what happens to your blood sugars 2 hours later. That was pretty much a trial and error in real life. My dad is not a nurse, would do anything for any of us. And he refused to give me my shot. And it was probably the best thing he ever did for me. So I was 12 and I'm in the parking lot sitting in his truck, and I knew what I wanted to eat. And fuck, I don't even know how we did it. We probably just guessed on how many carbs I would be eating. I don't even know. My dad has no concept of nutrition at all either, so I don't know how we did that. But I knew what the conversion chart, that they gave me what I was supposed to shoot for, and I handed him my pen, and he handed it back to me and he said, I can't do this for you. I would take it all away for you, but I can't. And at this point, my dad is crying, and he is so tough, and I'm not used to seeing this side of him. And he said, you go to school in 2 weeks. I can't be there with you. So you need to do this. And I was not ready to do this. I mean, what 12-year-old wants to stab themselves with a needle, right? So he sat there and stared out his window as the tears just poured down. And I did the same. But I was angry and I was scared because my dad is having this reaction that it really set the tone for how this was going to impact my life. And I say that day just set the tone for how I handle things, because he's right. He couldn't be there for me. They were there for me however they could be, but can't go to school with you. I can't handle all of life's battles with you. He equipped me with the ability to handle it myself. So that was day one of tough love with Pops. And I know I credit so much of being healthy to him. If it wasn't for my mom's opposite approach of just compassion and love and acceptance, I would probably be very harsh and a lot more abrasive than I am. So I attribute a lot of that to my mom too. But yeah, so that's the earliest memory that I have of diabetes.
Well, I think it's a perfect example of, life is not one way or the other. You need all the things. And obviously we opened it with, mentioning that your dad's response to emotions and whatnot, but he, I could see a lot of people, if they just saw the situation without it being explained, it could be harsh, telling a 12-year-old, obviously I don't know how it went, but hey, suck it up.
You could imagine knowing him.
So I'm imagining, him, suck it up. This is it. This is life now. Like, fucking deal with it. Obviously I don't know if that's what he said. So
it was softer. It was definitely softer than that. but it was direct. It was, unless you want to stay at home and be in a bubble for the rest of your life, you have to figure this out. And let's be honest, I'm either going to I'm going to get a shot one way or the other. He has no experience with this, right? Like, so we're both going in it completely lost. He wasn't there for the intake appointment. He was still at work. I can't even imagine what my mom was experiencing going to work the next day, knowing that my dad is an incredible dad, but she was overwhelmed and didn't know what to do. And she at least had some sort of background. He did not, right? And, I have a twin brother, so we had another 12-year-old. And then Dustin would have been 14 at the time. So, but anyways, he was softer. He was very soft. The tears really make everything soft, right? So he could have been like, suck it up. And I know that there was a lot of pain for him,
right,
as there was for me.
Well, I think but it's so hard, thinking about, if you don't have kids, trying to even imagine yourself in that situation, I would say is probably nearly impossible. Because even with a child, trying to imagine what that situation would be like is impossible. And, I've always had a fairly good imagination when it comes to that kind of thing. Maybe not in all the things, whether it comes to playing with Barbie dolls or something like that with my daughter. But, the foresight of him being able to say, look, you have to be able to do this. And not only the difficulty of him knowing that, but him having to essentially force that upon you. Like, no, there is something indescribable that comes when you have no control, particularly for somebody you love. It's one thing to not have control over something in your own life, but to want to have control to be able to help, and you can't. I cannot imagine that. But you mentioned your mom's kind of, maybe not opposite approach, but different approach. So what was, I think we can kind of get a picture of who your pops was at this point. Was, look, we have a task here. We have, a goal that we have to achieve. It's not, and it's there. These are the things we have to do. And taking a kind of stern-ish approach to it. But you mentioned your mom kind of having a different, softening that a little bit. What exactly, what was that kind of like?
So my mom was that way in many aspects, growing up. I'd go play basketball and I'd get, make 10 points or whatever. On the way home from Pops, I'm hearing like, why the fuck did you miss 6? What, and, I remember my mom would be like, Les, like, they won. She did great. Did you miss that part? And he goes, no, she already knows what she did. Good. Like, let's fix what she did bad. So they're just very opposite in that regard. And he's not wrong, right? Like, he's so right. But my mom was always the one to remind me, like, you did good, babe. So, she, other than you, she is the first person that I still go to. I'll text my mom. Had a real rough night. Blood sugars were shit. I'm fine, but I need my mom, And I feel really sad for people who don't have that, because my mom is like my best friend, and My dad is the person, when you're in a relationship, it's usually, and you're bitching about something, you need to let him know ahead of time. Like, are we just bitching and you just need like a shoulder, or like, do you need a solution? Right. So my mom is the person that you go to when you just need to bitch or cry or, whatever. And then my dad is the person that you go to when you're like, okay, we're here for a plan. Like, we want to fix this, even though sometimes he has no fucking clue. But he really wants to. So I just remember, a lot of that. And, my mom stood behind him all the time. They didn't disagree on how it was handled. Now, they could have discussed it behind closed doors. I have no idea. I remember a lot of hushed conversations behind closed doors. I remember my mom being not openly emotional, but trying to hide emotion, which I would imagine parents would do, trying to protect their kids a little bit. Maybe not let them know how terrified they are of the situation. And again, if you don't know anything about diabetes, a unit of insulin is like a fourth of a drop of rain, maybe not even. Like, it's very, very small. 1 unit of insulin for me personally can drop my blood sugar 40 points. So 3 extra units of insulin could be detrimental to my health. It could make for a very low blood sugar, which could cause a lot of issues. So as a parent and being sent home and not knowing what, my medication level should be, and then letting your child go to sleep is extremely scary.
Right. So real quick with that, I definitely want to go back to that. But speak on normal levels with a normal person with an operating pancreas that controls insulin levels and glucose levels. Can you speak on the ranges and talked about like what those levels are so people understand, for what's, 40 points or this, or, 120 points is, the scale of, what all those things are so people can really understand that.
Yeah. So, and this is a little bit different in kids. I can imagine some parents and children, hopefully, might listen to this and get something out of it. So, these numbers might be a little off for kids, but for an average adult, a normal blood sugar would be between like 65 and 120 fasting. We would prefer it to be closer to 100 fasting. So fasting means you haven't had anything to eat or drink besides water for 10 to 12 hours. A normal functioning pancreas or patient, their blood sugar could go up to 125-ish after a meal and still be considered, normal. Once you start to get above that, you can be into what they call pre-diabetes. So
essentially a quote unquote normal functioning pancreatic person has a window centered around 100 from 80 to 120. So 40 points, give or take.
Yeah, to make it easy. Yeah. Of course, somebody could listen to this and say, that is not exactly right for me. Okay. It's per patient. But in general, as a family practice nurse, that is the guideline. That is what we are looking for. It usually takes 2 labs saying that you're above that to be considered pre-diabetic, or, depending on what your blood sugar is, that you are actually full-blown diabetic at this point. Yeah, so if, your body, so your pancreas works beautifully, you digest food, it knows the correct amount of insulin that is needed to unlock those cells for the glucose to go where it needs to go. So I have to be my own pancreas. So I have to take into consideration what I'm eating, how many carbs, but also is it high in protein, how much fat is in it, because that's going to affect the metabolism of the said carbs that you're eating. Complex carbs, which would be like your whole grains or, your vegetables that have carbs in them, they digest much later than simple carbs, which would be like your white breads or, your
Sour Patch Kids.
Your Sour Patch Kids, right? So,
as I see you have on handy.
Yes. So, helpful tip. If you have diabetes, you always need some sort of simple carbs handy. So, helpful tip: make it something you really enjoy, and don't let yourself have it any other time. So when you go low, it's fine. But yeah, so a lot goes into it, right? And now there's a lot of helpful ways, to keep an eye on all of that. But 20 years ago, and I really sound like I'm making myself old here.
Old as fuck. We
didn't have that. We had a finger stick. So that means that there was a device that still used all the time today. You prick your finger, a tiny drop of blood comes to the surface. You put it in the strip and it gives you a blood sugar reading. That's all that we had to base this on. You have no idea if you are on your way to a high blood sugar or if you're on your way to a low blood sugar. So you have to determine, I'm going to eat this food. This is what my blood sugar is. And this is how many units, I'm going to give. So a lot plays into that. Not to mention I turned 13, 4 weeks later. Teenager, hormones. I started my period like 10 months after that, which changes everything, right? So the first couple years were just a whirlwind. Once we figured out how much insulin I needed, figured it out, right? It's always kind of changing. I started my period. And right around the same time, we realized I needed quite a bit more insulin. So that was an indication that my pancreas finally stopped producing any insulin at all. So I required more.
So to just kind of, there's a lot there.
There is a lot there.
There's a lot. So there's a couple important things that I do want to touch on because you mentioned hopefully people listen to this. Particularly people going through a similar situation or even trying to understand, what diabetes is, because you started off talking about type 1 versus type 2. And I will try to do my best throughout this episode to not talk too much for you. But I'm passionate.
Mm-hmm.
But
you are in this.
I've had discussions with people that are my age that find themselves pre-diabetic or type 2, and it's the, I don't want to say the lack of concern for their health, but it's maybe the ignorance of it. And I mean that in the true definition of the word ignorance. They just don't know any better. So that the idea that, even the idea that there's two different types of carbohydrates some people, they just don't understand that. A complex carbohydrate, like you said, pastas and different things, or like potatoes will break down slower than, simple carbohydrates like sugar. And all those things are, and sugar is what's in sodas and juices. Even if it's a juice that's fresh, a fruit, that's still a simple sugar. Is it better for you than, manufactured sugar? Probably, yes. An apple is probably better for you than a glass of Coke, but they're still simple sugars. So body absorbs them much faster, and dumps that, takes that sugar into your, veins much faster. But so even the idea of how proteins, which is not a sugar, can affect that process, and fats. And, I don't think we'll get into that today. Maybe people can check you out and follow you on your fitness training journey as you're going through and get some more pieces of that. But the idea of trying to understand that, or even understand that that's a thing at the age of 12, 20 years ago, let alone. But it's a lot, and there's a lot of depth to that people don't see or understand. And it just goes back to the, you don't always know what's going on. But sorry, tangent myself. But I know people that, are my age that are type 2, and it's, I backed it down from, drinking a soda or whatever to eating this, whatever it is, bad choice of food. But people don't realize, I don't eat donuts anymore. I don't do this, and as they have a full blown energy drink in their hand that has, 80 grams of sugar. It's like, well, it's carbs. It's carbohydrates. What's carbohydrates? Well, that's sugar. So those things are important to realize that sometimes people just don't know. So trying to figure all those things out, let alone with hormones at this point, which if people also don't know, hormones, it's changes your entire body. So now at this point, you are not even a year later, and your hormones are doing what they do as a 13-year-old, or 10 to 14. That whole range is a disaster for everybody, I feel like. And you continue your journey at that point, and you have to test your blood to see what your glucose levels are throughout the day. And so kind of coming back to that range that you talked about, a quote unquote normal is 80 to 120 roughly. And that's kind of people hover at. But you said, you touched on a unit of insulin could change your blood sugar for how much. So what's the kind of ranges that you are fighting in, with your hormones being all over the place and trying to just figure out what's working and what's not? Where are you at that point in your state in your life there?
So I don't remember a lot of that. I know every time I get my A1C done, which A1C is a way of checking what your blood sugar average is over the last 3 months. Every time I get that done, I can see what it had been previously. And I know that when I was first diagnosed, so a normal, non-diabetic person, it's like below 6. And I was probably around 9.5, which you could probably look it up, but I want to say that probably puts your average blood sugar around like 190, which obviously is pretty significant, significantly high. However, I was still producing a little bit of insulin, but if I had to guess, that's where I was at. I don't remember a lot about that. I know that my parents told me that they would do random meter checks, which means they would randomly get my glucometer out and make sure that there was a blood sugar there before breakfast, mainly when I wasn't at home, before lunch, 2 hours after lunch, before I played basketball, during practice. If any of those were missed, I was in trouble. Right?
So they were making sure that you were just
Yes.
that you were doing your part to figure out.
Yes. And I know that sounds super harsh. However, it goes back to that parenting style where you can't be your kid's friend. You have to be the parent first, even if that's super hard for you. Right? You have to choose the harder journey if you want to help your kid's journey. Like, I can't even remember how I felt about that. Like, I was probably pissed, right? I don't remember. I don't ever remember thinking that, like, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to, well, of course I didn't want to do it, but I don't remember ever trying to fight, like, I want to break from this, or I'm just taking one. Like, I didn't have that option. There's no way they would allow that. I don't even know how often they checked my glucometer. But it's like today, or, this day and age, like, I'm gonna check your phone. Like, you don't put a password on it. I'm the parent. We don't do that now. Our kid's only 9, but if you're living here, I'm gonna check your phone. So that's how it was. You can't make up a blood sugar at 11:45 on a Tuesday, where you should be checking it at lunch, right? And why is that important? Well, you ate lunch, so how do you know how much insulin you're supposed to be doing? I myself personally, I am very sensitive to cardio exercise. 60-minute basketball practice is a lot of exercise. So knowing where I'm at starting, if my blood sugar is a little too low, I need to eat some simple carbs. If I'm a little high, it's probably ideal because the practice is going to bring me down. But I would need to check halfway through just to check.
Right.
Also, anytime I didn't feel right, if your blood sugar is high, you get really thirsty, you can get blurred vision, you can get irritable. When you're low, you feel warm, you also are irritable. Part of my face goes numb. You have a hard time linking the correct words together. So anytime any of those symptoms would come on, I'd have to check my blood sugar. Right. So again, my mom always backed my dad on that. He wasn't the only one. She would say, I'm going to check your meter. And I don't ever remember getting yelled at. I'm sure I did, right? I'm sure I forgot or was late or something. But I don't remember it. So it wasn't like this traumatic thing. It was super needed.
Right. But to put that kind of in context for everybody, so you have this 12, 13-year-old girl that just got told that you're going to have to do these injections for the rest of your life. You have to consider what you're eating for lunch every day. Anytime you eat something, you have to do mathematical calculations. You have to prepare yourself for the ramifications of that. You have to plan this out. And, that doesn't stop. That's
ever.
Yeah. You have to eat. And every single time you have to eat, you have to consider what you're eating and what it's going to do to your body. And so you've mentioned, a normal A1C level is, just under 6. You mentioned maybe you might be up around 9, this, that, whatever. We've mentioned, the blood glucose level from 80 to 120 is normal-ish for normal people. But to consider that every moment of your life is, hey, I need to eat. What do I need to do so I can eat? And I guess a two-part thing is, one, what are the extended ranges of those numbers so people can kind of understand that, okay, 80 to 120 is normal. Well, are we talking 80 to 120 on a 0 to 200 scale?
Oh,
Or
yeah. Okay.
or with the A1C. And so what are these extent ranges? What do they mean for you and your body? And then, how do you, well, we can start there.
Okay.
We'll do that.
So now is a little bit different than then. Obviously, when you are just starting out, your ranges you have to have more leeway because you don't know what you're doing. And I did want to bring back that, you mentioned proteins and fats and how those affect your blood sugars. I did not know any of that at the time. Like that
Right.
definitely came later. So we definitely started very bare bones. But for me personally, as an adult now, if I hit 60 or below, that's pretty low for me. I'm just going to say it. I'm an outlier. My A1C has been has been at non-diabetic range for probably 3 years. And that is not because I have it easy. It's because I work really hard for it.
Right.
However, along with that comes some low blood sugars, because I'm scared to death of the side effects long-term with high blood sugars. The side effects of a low blood sugar are a lot more scary in the moment. But anything below 60 for me is pretty, I require some sort of fast acting glucose.
So I think just to point that out real quick. So a normal, quote, normal blood sugar is 80 to 120, a 40-point range. And basically going 40 points or 20 points from that 40-point range is where it's, oh, there's something wrong here.
Mm.
So it happens quickly.
Yeah. So it worked, just to put into perspective, if we do a finger stick on a patient and it is 55, I believe, it is a critical. Like you have to alert the provider. So there are some times where my blood sugar will hit 60 and I won't feel it. I have no change in side effects.
Because of your consistent low control.
Unfortunately, yes. So having great, I'm doing air quotes, great control does have its slight disadvantages, that my body doesn't alert myself that I'm low because it's used to staying in this range. If I get to 40, that's when, the side effects come. But on the opposite side of that,
Just briefly touch on, because I'm sure we'll touch on it more, but just so people understand
of a low,
what happens when you're not just low and your face gets a little numb or foggy.
Yeah. So sometimes it comes on pretty quickly. Sometimes it's gradual, but this part of my face will go numb, get really hot, confused, really tired, and not just like a tired, I want to take a nap, like tired to where I know that I should be getting a snack and I am super diligent, but I can't actually get up to get one. Like I have a lot of shame at that point in time. Those situations doesn't happen too frequently, but I get so mad because I know the only way to fix how I'm feeling is to get something to eat. But I feel like I physically can't, I have passed out from a low blood sugar. It happens. That's doesn't happen often. I do drop low often, and it's usually just sweaty, shaky, a little bit confused. I know what I have to do. I do it, and it fixes it. That's pretty much the day-to-day aspect.
Right. So just if I can try to relate this, because I've experienced it, I guess there's a couple ways I could try to explain it to where people could relate to it. Obviously, I have no idea exactly what it feels like, but we've had enough conversations that I feel like I can at least relate to it a little. If you've ever, haven't eaten in a while and you have that empty stomach feeling, but all of a sudden your body just starts tingling because you feel like you just have no energy because you haven't eaten anything or whatever it is. And you kind of feel like you maybe had a beer or two or a drink or two without obviously having a drink or two. And you kind of get that tingly sensation and that kind of almost kind of weakness, or maybe a little bit of that is, if you've ever stood up real fast and you had a head rush and you kind of had that tunnel vision, that kind of, feeling. I don't know a better way to explain it, but kind of, obviously that's not exactly it, but a culmination of that, but it doesn't just go away. So you have that, your strength is just kind of sucked out of you. You're foggy and tunnel visioned and you're just kind of tingly, numb, and like, I just need to lay down. That's what your body's telling you. But obviously your brain at this point has recognized these things in your brain saying, no, you're low, you need something, but your body is trying to do something entirely different. I do think that's at least a fair attempt at a description.
Yeah, I think so. It's very nuanced.
Yeah.
So there are times where a 60, I don't feel it. There are times where I will have a blood sugar of 50 and it's noticeable by those around me, and I grab a snack and I'm fine. 3 weeks ago, we were outside working. So not only does cardio activity severely drop my blood sugar, so does the heat. We were outside and I came in, I pushed it too hard. I knew my blood sugar was low. I kept going. I waited too long. I also then was dumb and I wanted a specific snack that required me to actually make it, which then added more time. So by the time I was done making, and there was a ton of fat in it, which slows the digestion, which means the sugar did not get to my system. I was a dumbass. And you were outside. And you came in and you knew I was low, and I said I ate something, and you went back out, and tunnel vision started, and I was super sweaty. My words weren't even making sense in my head. So I sat on the ground right in the kitchen and I yelled for Kai. She came running and I said, "Get daddy." And that's the last thing that I remember. I made it to the floor. Like, I sat on the floor before I called for her, and I know you came in. I wasn't,
right.
I don't want to say I passed out. I just definitely left for a little bit. I remember when I stood back up finally after you got me some juice. There was, should have been the first thing that I had literally 10 minutes before that.
I got you, babe.
Yeah, you're real good. Just the floor, our kitchen floor was just covered in sweat. Like, it was not because I was working outside. Like, it was so bad. So then there are those times. I remember when we were dating and I went to the dentist, and so I couldn't eat anything for a while. And I obviously was still living at home. I was probably 17, 18 maybe. And I don't remember I think I had some teeth pulled or something, and I couldn't eat anything. and you came over after work and you walk in, and this is just my mom telling the story, you could probably take over, but I remember you walk in to my mom slapping me in my face so that I could eat some food because I had been sleeping all day, hadn't ate anything, and you take your insulin, like I mentioned at the beginning, that is background insulin that lasts 24 hours. It's still working. I had been sleeping, didn't know to check my blood sugar because I had been sleeping. I ended up very low. And I know you walked in on that, and my mom was handling it.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember afterwards she lost it. My mom was always there, but as soon as I was able to take over, I did. And I tried to keep as much, not from them, but, I didn't want her to experience more than she had to. And I know that she hadn't had to deal with that. She hadn't had to see that in a while. And I remember just knowing that you had walked into that.
Yeah, I do remember that very vividly. You of all people know that my memory is not great, at least for most things. I remember that, and it's silly now, maybe not silly, I don't know. But I think it was, but maybe back up before that. I had kind of understood, putting it coldly, the logistics of what's, what was going on with your body. But, for whatever reason, I just liked you. And, I wanted to be there and figure out and learn so I could be there for you. But I do remember that extremely vividly, walking in that door, and you were in that state of it's if anybody, like, it's kind of like, and I'm not trying to like make a joke out of this at all, because it's, it's not, but we gotta laugh at some things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that person in high school that got drunk for the first time and they just overdid it. You can, if you think about your friend that had their first beer or their whatever for the first time, and at first they're kind of little, talking about the stages here, and I'll get back to walking in there. But just so people can kind of understand that people see it, it's it's a little goofy at first. You're like, because it's you start off a little goofy, and then they start to decline, and you can tell the physical and mental, like, fog comes on, and then it's, oh no, I just need to lie down. I just need to sit. Like, I'm fine. And then they sit or lay down, and then unconscious. Well, most of the times, if you're drinking and that happens, the person just needs to sleep it off, whatever. But it's not exactly how it works with the type 1 diabetic, because you have to introduce glucose into the system to get them to wake back up. It's not just sleep it off. So when it gets to the point of the passing out and unconsciousness, which is what I walked into, that alert, and your mom was trying to alert you, hey, kind of that whole, hey, stay with me here for a little bit. And she had gotten you, I can't remember what it was. I think it was like grape juice or something like that. And you were, as much as you could protest it, but you were in and out of consciousness.
I am very stubborn.
You are very stubborn.
Even in my subconscious, apparently.
Yeah, it was, you're probably saying how gross it tastes or whatever. But that was it. it made me realize that, okay, this is a dire situation when this happens. And, she acted and she did what she had to do. And it's stay with me and let's get some sugar in you. And then once we've accomplished that goal, okay, now we can sit back. Kind of like the story you just told about recently. Kyrie, our daughter, came out yelling that you were on the floor. And I was like, my first thought was, oh my gosh, she passed out and hit her head, because I knew you were low, but we've been through plenty of those. And that was my first thought, was she passed out and fell, because that's real dangerous. But you were semi coherent when I came in, and I had I asked you questions and you were able to answer them a little woozy, but at the same time, it's that instinct in me. Let's just get a little juice in you too while we're at it, because part of that, those ends of the spectrum, that we talked about, is when you go really low, you pass out. You go really high. Okay, long term, you're doing a lot of damage to your body, which we haven't touched on yet. But you don't pass out. You can get sick, but you don't pass out.
Unless you're really, really high.
Right. Unless you get way up there. But it's much easier for you to pass out from a low blood sugar than it is a high blood sugar. So, the problem with passing out from a low blood sugar is you can't eat anything. So then it becomes a problem of, okay, what do you do now? But I do remember that. And it was kind of one of those, maybe subconscious. It didn't freak me out. I mean, I'm still here. Mm-hmm. But it was recognizing that, okay, this is kind of emergency mode and we have to do what we have to do. And then as soon as, the job's done, then we realize, if we do the math in our head, and okay, it's going to take some time. That took me a little while to realize that, like, it's going to take you some time to come back. We can solve the problem and then we can break down and deal with it.
So going back to what you said about, for some reason you liked me. So, trying to go through high school for a normal, healthy person is real rough, right? Like,
We've already talked
high
about the
school.
hormones.
It's hormones, and they don't stop, and it's just a lot. And
dribbled them.
I remember being a freshman, and Beth, she was a senior, and she played basketball too, and she was awesome. So I probably was like fangirling, because at the time basketball was like my life. I loved it. And I remember having like my first high school boyfriend, and I remember telling him that I had diabetes, right? Like, it's not something that I was always super ashamed about. And, whatever emotion you feel for something that's going on in your body, like, that's for you to feel, right? Like, obviously I could sit here and tell you that life is a lot easier if you don't put shame on yourself or whatever. But I remember not like advertising it, but I don't really remember being super like hiding it per se. And so I remember telling him that, and this is at my locker, right? Like, I am a freshman. I am maybe 14.
You were young.
I was very young. So it's not like I'm allowed to go on dates or anything. And I remember Beth coming to me, and she said, "Hey, so-and-so asked me if he could catch diabetes." And then that just made me realize, like, a year and a half ago, I had no idea what it was, so I wanted to be like, "No, you dumbass." Like, but at the same time, I had no idea what it was a year and a half ago. Right. So luckily she was smart enough to say, like, "No, can't catch it. It's totally fine. I practice with her every day, and just sometimes she has to stop. And, you know, he stayed around for a little while. But that wasn't always the case, right? I've definitely had people extremely uninterested when they found out, which understandably so. I was young, which means they were young. Like, you don't know what you're getting into. I didn't have a whole lot of boyfriends per se, but you were the first person that I told you. And you're like, okay, not that you brushed it off, but like, it wasn't this big significant bomb that got dropped like I anticipated it being. But I remember like a month or so into dating, I don't know if we were watching a movie or something, but you stopped it and you just said, I want to know everything. Like, obviously, you probably at that point had experienced some of it, and I was always going to the bathroom to give myself shots. And I do remember you thinking it was super weird at first why I went to the bathroom so often, because I wouldn't even check my blood sugar in front of you. So I would go to the bathroom for that, and I'd go to the bathroom for any shots that I had to do.
But also, PSA, if you're going to the bathroom a lot as a child,
that is a big symptom of diabetes.
High blood sugars, going to the bathroom. So she was not going to the bathroom a lot because she had to go to the bathroom at that point.
Yeah, I was just slipping away. So I just remember you saying, like, I want to know. I want to know what this entails. I want to know what you're feeling. I want to know how I can help. And I remember you left that night, and I just was blown away. I hadn't even had friends that wanted to be invested in that, They wanted to maybe check their own blood sugar or, and they definitely cared, they looked out for me best that they could, but, it was never like educate me. Like, let me know what you're going through. How can I help you? And you were the first person to do that. And that meant more than you could ever imagine. I remember telling my mom and she cried. It just made me feel, if you hadn't have been like that, I would have been okay. But I'm definitely someone who is not going to take being treated how I shouldn't be. Right. So if, it's not something that I just would have like hid away in a box, if you weren't okay with. And I fear that people do that, and that's sad. I am a lot. There's a lot that comes with this. And I was just grateful that you wanted to understand it.
Well, I think a lot of it, kind of trying to encapsulate that. It's one thing to be just, you realize a thing is a thing, but you don't necessarily deal with it. You said some of your friends they just didn't have any idea. And some people, we just don't have any idea of what it really goes to, you have no idea what some other people are going through until you ask them. So it's, it's kind of like that middle ground of, well, yeah, there's this thing that's going on. Like, she has this thing, but I don't know, whatever. Like, she seems normal, whatever. Because I'm sure, I'm just assuming at this point that you're trying to be as normal as you could be as a, 12 to, whatever 18-year-old. You just want to be normal. And if you don't ask somebody, you'll never know what they're going through. And, and I applaud you for, saying like you didn't want to hide it. This wasn't a thing that like, I'm sure there's plenty of times that it made you kind of feel different or weird or whatever. You know, you want to go to the bathroom to check this up, like understanding that you didn't deserve to feel bad because of who you are. You know, I think that's the negative end of the spectrum. You know, you shouldn't hide who you are. But I don't know, I guess if we never ask what someone's going through, we don't know what someone's going through. So it's just, sometimes it's just ask, you know, ask if, and it's not just a, hey, you okay? Yeah. Okay, cool. You know, asking those more in-depth questions of, hey, tell me about this. I want to know about you. And like, and maybe that's what it was for me. I just, regardless of how much either of us didn't want that to be a part of you, and he said it is. So I wanted to know about you. And I wanted to be there to support that. But
I think that it's maybe not easier, but because it's something that you can't see on the outside, other than when you have symptoms that stand out, you know, you appear normal, right? Which is great. But it also, I remember a lot of times, people maybe not believing me, but thinking that like, well, you look fine, you know, so you're fine. Even if I would tell them like, I'm not fine, like either I'm not fine in this very moment, or like in general, I'm not like this healthy person. You know, I was always skinny growing up. I'm not healthy, you know. I don't even want to use the word healthy because that's not the right word, but you look okay, so you must be okay. I mean, I remember being called a liar,
right.
You know, and that's just, now I literally don't even care. But when you're younger, like you just want people to understand. Like I didn't even understand, so how would I expect somebody else to understand? But, you know, I remember, I don't know. It's just, it's different. So yeah,
Well, I think maybe just, and his last thing I want to do is make this about me. You've already said how awesome I was. So, you know, but maybe subconsciously, and maybe this is just a tidbit we can say and then skim over. But maybe subconsciously, I was not okay. Maybe not necessarily physically, I was fine, but you know, I think it's, if you didn't know any better, what you were just saying, you could apply to like mental health.
mm-hmm.
You seem okay. You're fine. You know, we've discussed, you know, lately military personnel and PTSD and things that they go through. And some of those folks that, you know, a lot of people go through different things that we just don't know. And it's, well, you look okay, so you must be okay. So maybe that was just kind of one of those things where I realized like, oh, I realized that without actually realizing that. But so, you know, we've talked about what happens when you go low. It's scary. You can lose your physical capabilities, passing out. You know, and that can be a scary situation. But you also mentioned earlier the long-term ramifications of being high. So it seems like going super low, you know, well, only 40 points below normal can be very dangerous and emergent short term.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned the long term, and that's why you would rather kind of risk being in that lower range because of the long term issues. If you could maybe talk about that range of numbers that we've talked about, and what are those kind of long term complications, because I'm sure you've thought and considered them and seen them.
Yeah, so probably a week after I was diagnosed, which would have been maybe a week before I started 8th grade, I remember being in my parents' bedroom, and my dad sat me on his bed, and he ripped the diabetic complications Band-Aid off, right? So he painted this very detailed picture of what my life would look like in my 20s and 30s if I didn't make this a priority. So your blood sugar is too high for too long, and that can be very dependent on the individual. You can have neuropathy, which you can get neuropathy in so many different places. But
so, real quick, what is roughly, from a medical standpoint, too high, and also what is neuropathy?
Well, so
just obviously general terms,
yeah,
because we're speaking generally here.
So above 120, or higher if you've had some food. I don't know. You could have an average blood sugar of 170 your whole life and not have a complication. It's very individual to other things that are going on. But when you think diabetes and how it's discussed in our culture today, it's high blood sugars. It's literally hyperglycemia, which is elevated blood sugars. That's what that is. When you're high for long periods of time, that's when you have the symptoms that are so likely associated with diabetes.
Well, I guess what I was trying to allude to is we've known people that have type 1 and type 2 they hang out in the 400s.
Yeah. So,
so it's
super high.
Obviously we talked about 80 to 120 is normal. You said 170, that's kind of high, but we've known people that are hanging out in the 2s, 300s, 400s, and above.
Mm-hmm.
This, I guess I'll just go ahead and say it. The picture I'm trying to paint is 80 to 120, that 40-point range is normal. 40 points low is super low. But guess what? It doesn't stop there. That range can shoot way up.
Yeah,
So
and I understand what you're saying. I guess I'm just trying to say, like, it's so broad, right? So people can come in and they can have their first blood sugar of 900, right? Like they pass out at home and their blood sugar is 900, and you have type 1 diabetes, right? And they likely, leading up to that point, had symptoms that they probably just missed, or they thought, they contributed to something else. But yeah, some people, they just hang around in the 300s. Like, for them, they feel normal there because that's where they hang out all the time. That for me is extremely high. So yeah, anything, for me, I do a correction if I'm above 170. That's a pretty that's what works for me, or that's where I want to stay. People have different parameters. People that are elderly, we allow them to go up a little bit higher for their safety, right? We don't need them doing insulin injections. They can get away with it being a little bit higher. Same with younger kids. Maybe that's changed now, but that's how it was when I was diagnosed. I was given a wider range, and then the older I got, my range got smaller. But staying up in that constant high, which is like 200s, 300s, just staying out there. That's where you get your complications. So if I had $1 for every time I heard, oh, my aunt has diabetes. She lost her leg. Cool. Great. So, I don't even
due to neuropathy.
Yes, I don't even know like the actual like definition of neuropathy. You could probably look it up, but diabetics have certain things that they get checked. Your blood pressure, right? You could have high blood pressure, which can lead to an array of cardiac issues. Same thing with cholesterol. Could have high cholesterol, but then there's things like like peripheral neuropathy. I get my vision checked once a year. They check the sensation in my feet. Can I feel things? One of the first symptoms or complications rather that could come with diabetes type 1 or type 2 is your vision changes. You might not notice it, but you start to get neuropathy in your eyes. Do you have it pulled up?
Neuropathy is the disease or dysfunction of one or more peripheral nerves, typically causing numbness or weakness. So it's the general, degrading of the nerves outside of the brain essentially is.
Yeah, and so that you can have that anywhere. Right? Yeah, so I always do a little celebration because I was told that vision is usually not that my vision necessarily would change, but that neuropathy in my eyes is usually a complication that they find early.
And you haven't had to have glasses until well, you didn't have to have glasses for quite a while.
Yeah. Oh, and it doesn't
especially
change.
Coming from somebody that had to have glasses in middle school.
Yeah. My vision has absolutely nothing to do with diabetes. I just, when I turned 18, just realized I needed glasses or contacts. No, it doesn't.
So there's no,
Mm-mm.
if you couldn't have any complications with your vision from being diabetic?
No, you would get like neuropathy, which is what I go and get checked for every year annually. I've never had an issue. I just needed glasses.
Right, but there's what I'm saying is that if you weren't to take care of yourself, it wouldn't degrade your eyesight. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it could. You could get there's an array of symptoms that come along with peripheral neuropathy.
That's what I meant.
Yes.
It could affect your vision if you didn't take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was not
you're
picking
just,
up on
you're just getting old as fuck.
Yeah, I was just going.
Oh, sorry, we're trying to make this family appropriate. Sorry.
I just needed glasses at 18. It had nothing to do with being diabetic.
No, that was my point, was you were just getting old.
Yeah.
And your vision was changing.
So,
not that you were yes.
The neuropathy, the main side effect of that then would be vision loss. If I had $1 every time someone told me when I was, in high school that their so-and-so, their grandma, lost her vision and had to have her big toe amputated because of diabetes. Cool, right? Like what do you say to that? So you have that. You have the neuropathy, which would be numbness and extreme like nerve pain in your feet. That's why if you don't take care of yourself, you can end up needing to get those amputated, right? Kidney disease, you could end up having to be on dialysis. I don't know what the percentage is, but the percentage increased significantly of having a stroke, or coronary artery disease, or, a heart attack. So I remember sitting on the bed and my pops just said, well, first of all, you won't even be allowed to get your license if we're doing these meter checks and they're not on point. At that point, I still had 2 years before I was driving. However, when you're 14, like that's
all you want.
Yeah, you're excited because that's the thing that's going to happen. Because if you take into consideration everything that we've discussed, getting behind, being the driver of a vehicle is a really bad idea. if you're not controlled, if you're not checking your blood sugar before you start the car. So meter checks were enforced a lot more after that happened. But I thought for sure if I didn't take care of my blood sugars, I would be blind by the time I was 25. I thought I would be in a wheelchair with one of my legs gone. I didn't know what dialysis was, but I know it sounded really bad.
Right.
And that's what I thought my future was going to be for a really long time. Not only that, I knew at the time the percentage of teenagers diagnosed around my age, how many made it out of high school without a complication. Whether it's something minor, like the beginning of, you could live with peripheral neuropathy and have your vision for years, but it's still there. It's still an indication. It's still considered a complication secondary to being diabetic. I knew how many kids didn't make it or what their lifespan was, and I was told that if I took care of myself, I'd be fine. But, he was true, my doctor, he was very honest. He was very blunt. He said, anything you want to do, I'll try to make sure you can do it. And he did, but, it very much shaped how I handle things now. I need everything. I need the truth. I need it up front. I need it to be blunt, and then I handle it. And I'm assuming because of that's how we handled this, right? Like, this is where you could be, and this is where you're at right now. What you do is going to determine how you live the rest of your life, right? How your 20s and 30s and 40s are going to end up. I remember being excited that I made it to 30.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think oh, I'm going to die. I just didn't know, and I guess I say all that to say that I don't ever remember not trying my hardest. I don't remember not getting up in the middle of the night when I had to pee and knowing that that's a symptom of a high and checking my blood sugar and then having to do a correction when I could have just said I'm tired and go back to sleep and deal with it in the morning, right? I never remember not sacrificing what I could to be the healthiest that I could be. Obviously, the older you get, the more you learn. You don't know what you don't know when you don't know it. So we did the best that we could. But I remember, I remember never trying to take a vacation because you can't. You can't. And I think it's just because the picture that was painted for me of what happens. As soon as I became 18, I could have stopped, right? I could have done whatever I wanted, but it was already so ingrained that that's not going to provide a life that's beneficial for you. So I became really mature at 12. And I think you had mentioned, you have to take into consideration what food you're eating, how much of it you're eating, what am I going to be doing? Am I going to be playing a sport after school, or am I going to go to the gym after work? What did I do 2 hours ago that could be possibly changing my blood sugar right now? All of that. So it's constantly looking at what you did and looking at what you're going to be doing to determine what to do right now. And that doesn't stop. So it's this constant
barrage.
Yeah. It's this constant reel just going on in the back of your head while you're also still supposed to do normal life stuff, right? You're still supposed to be a mom and go to work and, have a social life. And, you don't want diabetes to rule your life, because that'd be miserable too. But it's it consumes a certain part of you that it never stops, ever. Like, it can't, because it doesn't stop, so you never can stop, right? Like, you don't get that choice. You don't get to say, no, I need a break. I'm not going to have diabetes today.
Right.
People do. I've read so many articles about teens that take a break and they don't make it. They either go into DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis, which is your blood sugar is very, very high, and it can lead to death. So, yeah, a super high blood sugar may not put you into may not make you pass out, but it could put you into a coma. And each individual is different. I have never had DKA, knock on wood. I feel like that is probably pretty rare for 20 years.
I've had some scares.
Not from highs necessarily. Oh, yeah. So that one time we did.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, DKA is very, very scary. It can cause symptoms that stay with you forever. Then afterwards, but I guess looking at that and looking on how I handle things may look more difficult. But I promise you, being in DKA in the hospital is much harder.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think it goes, I'll just start out with saying all the way back to the beginning of the balance of tough love and grace that you were given was key. And I'm speaking for you. I'm assuming at this point, was key to what you have developed into and realizing the path before you. Sometimes, we don't get to make our own choices, but we get to decide how we handle those choices that we're not allowed to make. So it's a journey of loving parents and people around you that were able to help you. But I think to put all of the glory on them would be a disservice to what you've done individually. Obviously the way that you were raised, in the honesty and the bluntness, and that without a doubt has been, beneficial to you at this point. But your fortitude to push forward and to strive to be healthy, I can't be denied. And realizing that, looking at the long term of, not even knowing exactly what's going to happen, but what could happen, and you realizing that and deciding to do those hard choices and pushing forward regardless. That says a lot about the person that you are, regardless of the things that are inflicting you. And I don't know, maybe I see that every day. So I often not forget it, but it's often not necessarily, glaring to me, because that's just who you are. And that's how I know who you are. And that's what I appreciate about you.
Is that what you appreciate about me?
One of the things. But, so we've talked about the beginning and what you've gone through and the concerns and the highs and the lows, as it were. Do you think that's do you continually to look forward to, what could be and what you have now? I guess maybe this is a better question for you. Reflecting back on your journey from when this started to here to where you are now. Not necessarily is there anything that you would change, but what are some reflections on, because it's been a long time at this point. We basically have discussed your teens, and you're getting old. But there's a lot of time in your 20s and now in your 30s that you still essentially have very, 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 very minimal complications. And you touched on...
I don't have any complications, technically.
Well, impact.
We've had episodes and impacts.
You've had extremely minimal impact.
And I hate to say, I haven't had any complications as if that determines your worth, right? Or your healthiness as a diabetic, or I don't say it to put myself on a pedestal. I say it because I'm super, super grateful and super, super proud of that. I don't want someone to hear that and think oh, I'm not doing a good job because I have this, that, or the other. It's all patient.
Right. Like you said, everybody's different.
Everyone is so different, and my day will come, and I won't be any less proud of how I handle myself, because I know that if it comes, it's not because of something I didn't do. So I will take it, and I will keep on keeping on, right? There's nothing else you can do. I guess I technically do now have a second autoimmune disease because somehow related to the first. But I don't know if you would count that as a complication. I just kind of decided to tag along, but continue. I just wanted to clarify. Episodes and complications are different.
Yeah. I guess there's just so much. I guess there's just so much in there, what you just said too. Is there anything, as you mentioned, that looking forward, you just said your day will come. I could talk about that too, but looking back through your 20s and 30s, and essentially without too many episodes or complications, is there anything that is there anything different or anything you could touch on? 20 years, it's a pretty long time to be fighting the fight. Is there what I'm gonna go with the cheesy one just because it just keeps on hitting me. 20 years later, what would you tell you at 12?
I would have said, life is going to be hard regardless. Choose your heart. Staying diligent and dedicated. It's hard. You have to make sacrifices, right? There are times where I go to bed real early because I've had a real rough day. There are times where I have had to stay home from something I really wanted to do because my blood sugars were shit. And when I say that, they were either low all night, so I woke up and there is a long-lasting effect afterwards the next day, or I was high, which also puts you in a mental state that's not fun. There are times when your blood sugars, you legally aren't allowed to drive. You actually can't go somewhere, and that's to protect you and everyone around you, right? It's hard. But the picture my dad painted me is also really hard. So choose your heart, right? It's not going to be easy. It's certainly not fair. But that doesn't make it, it doesn't change it. You can do it. That you're going to question your worth a lot, because with you comes all of this extra stuff, and you're not always fun, and you have to plan and you have to prepare, and that has now become ingrained in you. So maybe I would have tried to find ways to keep that into a separate part of my life, because I now am such a planner and I have to be prepared, and I am rather anal, because that's what's kept me alive and that's what's kept me safe. So it has seeped into other aspects of my life, and maybe that's not necessarily healthy per se. But you're gonna be really proud of who you are. A few more things I would tell myself. Things are hard, and I said we choose our hard, but you have a really big life that you're gonna live. I've done some really, really great things. I have participated in all kinds of physical or athletic events that I didn't know I would be able to do. Just because you can't make it through a couple track meets doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to do incredible things. You're going to win your first powerlifting meet, and that's going to be pretty sweet. That was really cool. You're not going to know if you're going to be able to handle something until you try it. Try it. And then if you can't handle it, that's okay. The sacrifice is going to be worth it. Bitterness is going to take a lot of your energy, and it may make you feel better at the time, but it's not worth it. I used to be really bitter about type 2 diabetics, because I was constantly being put in that same group of people, and I didn't want to be, because I didn't have a choice. And when I was younger, in my mind, every type 2 ate themselves there, and they got there because of lifestyle changes or lifestyle choices that they could have changed, and they didn't. There's a lot of gray. It's not absolute. As much as I hated being put in the group with type 2s, there are so many type 2s that did nothing, and their pancreas just stopped producing enough insulin. They are healthy and they are fine. And I can't imagine what it feels like to them to be grouped by someone like me as someone who made shit choices. And even the ones that maybe did put themselves there, they're not making any changes, it still doesn't change your life. So there's a lot of wasted energy and a lot of hate towards a group of people that don't deserve it. So put that energy towards something positive, and just as much as I don't want someone to assume they know my situation, I can't assume I know their situation. And don't watch Steel Magnolia, even though someone told you to. It's not good. Just don't watch it. It's not a good movie. Don't listen to those people. It's really bad.
So what you're saying is spend your time being as healthy as you can be, winning powerlifting competitions, deadlifting 3 times your body weight, damn near.
Not yet.
Close. Being a CrossFit coach if you want to.
Yeah. Despite being broken and brittle on the inside, you can be really fucking strong. You can be strong mentally. You can be strong physically. You can do it. You're going to have to work harder than somebody without diabetes. But your triumph is going to be so much greater. You can do it. And you're not a quitter if I could say anything, you're not a quitter if it's too hard. It's a really fine balance between wanting to live this full life and wanting to play it safe to be healthy for a long life. I try to find that balance all the time. I loved CrossFit, and it was so hard to give it up. But physically, it was wreaking so much havoc on my body, I could not keep doing it. It's the first time that my endocrinologist said, this isn't working. I was having way too many lows, especially in the middle of the night. We were having a lot of scares, but I loved it. And at some point I had to say, this isn't worth it. And that was really hard. And I felt like a quitter. But it was not quitting. It was making a sacrifice. It wasn't more important than being here for my daughter. And people can hear that and be like, oh my gosh, it's just CrossFit. And you're right, it is just CrossFit, but it made me feel strong, and it made me feel, I don't know, like an athlete, like something I hadn't felt since high school that I loved. And as soon as I realized it was causing harm, I gave it up. And it was a sacrifice. It wasn't quitting. Just putting that out there, that sometimes you have to make those hard decisions, and it's hard to know. You know, I absolutely love lifting, and I will figure out a way to make that healthy and be a part of my life, no matter what. I could probably do that with CrossFit now with some of the extra things that I have. You know, I didn't have a continuous glucose monitor then. I have one now. I could probably do it. But I have found a passion in powerlifting and bodybuilding type workouts. And, you know, it's just one of those things that I've moved on from. But
you can find something.
Yeah. And a continuous glucose monitor has absolutely changed my life, but we can get into that later. But
right.
I don't know. I think I would change some things in my mid-20s. You know, we got pregnant early on purpose. My blood sugars were good. You know, my endocrinologist, nurse practitioner for my endocrinology was amazing. BJ Shook, she is retired now, but that lady changed my life. But you know, we got pregnant early, and we knew it was going to be high risk, even though my blood sugars were so controlled. And it was a really hard 9 months for both of us. Everything turned out perfectly fine. I was perfectly safe the whole time, or healthy. Kai is now 9. We had a very uneventful pregnancy and delivery, and she is perfect. But shortly after having her, I started having a lot of GI symptoms, and I started losing weight a little bit more quickly than what I should have been, just with breastfeeding. And talk about hormones in your teens. How about hormones after having a kid, right? And now we've been married for a couple of years, and you know, it's just a lot. Within like a year and a half, we did all of the big things. We bought a house. Yeah. We got pregnant. You know, we had gotten married probably a year and a half before that then. And I was extremely overwhelmed. Long story short, GI symptoms ended up being celiac disease, which, real quick, is just another autoimmune disease. So my body this time attacked the villi in my GI system, which basically takes the nutrients from your food and, spreads it out amongst your body. So I was having a lot of vomiting and diarrhea, and a couple months into that, we finally got it checked, had a scope done, and was diagnosed with celiac disease. Well, in my mind, you remove gluten from your diet, and you're fine, because that's what they told me. Now that I'm celiac disease, there's a lot more about gluten out there now. It's not necessarily exactly how it works. Your gut is so imperative to your mental health and so much of your physical health that it still affects a lot of things in your hormones. And I guess I didn't even realize that until even a couple years ago. But to put it lightly, I was a mess. I definitely probably had some depression that I did not even consider. Mental health is, we all have some sort of mental health. Mental health in regards to depression, anxiety, things like that is pretty significant with diabetics. I was dealing with all of that. But I know that I made life a lot of about me. One, because I felt like I had to survive. And also I wanted to be able to, I guess not share that, but maybe share that. It just was a lot going on at one time. And we had a pretty significant life change right about then. And I just remember you telling me that you were so wrapped up in my health that you hadn't allowed yourself time to be wrapped up in your own. And if I could have changed anything, it would have been somehow realizing that I wasn't the only one. I'm not the only one with a issue that you can't see, right? You can't just look at someone and assume that they're fine because they hold their shit together. I mean, there's a lot going on, but I maybe would have, in that point in time, tried to hold on to something that wasn't so consumed with being a diabetic and having celiac disease. And I allowed that to be my identity for a while because I was terrified and I was depressed, and I'm now a new mom and I have to go back to work. And I told myself like it was self-preservation, but I also think that I was just scared and lost and I didn't know how to handle life, basically. Obviously you can't change anything, but maybe I would have tried to hold on to that a little bit differently. Maybe not hold on to that differently, handle that differently, I guess. I don't know where I went with that. That was just a big long circle, but
So you were discussing going through the pregnancy and getting diagnosed with celiac disease, which is different than gluten intolerance, similar to type 1 and type 2 diabetes. They are similar in the ramifications and whatnot, but they have differences. So you, just as a person, as a supporter of a person with type 1 and celiac disease, know the difference. Coming from someone that doesn't have them, there's a difference. But and the struggles that kind of come along with that is now not only do you have to be concerned about what you're eating for your glucose levels to make sure you neither go too high nor too low, for all of the reasons that we've talked about. But now you also have to be concerned about what precisely you're eating, because anything that has wheat, rye, or barley will also put you in the hospital because of what those things will do to your body. With celiac disease.
Me personally, some people with celiac disease have completely different symptoms. My symptoms are just severe vomiting and diarrhea, which then wreak havoc on my blood sugars, and it's just this circle that ends. But some people, their celiac symptoms are different. But yes, continue.
Right. So there's shades of all of the grays amongst all the things, but I think that's an important point to try to get across is you are concerned essentially every single time you eat. Yeah. And then you develop celiac disease, which makes you even more concerned, not only about the time frame of what you're eating and how many carbs it holds, but also what. And this is just to kind of paint a picture. If you go to a restaurant, you don't know if they are frying their French fries or whatever in the same vat of grease or oil as they fry their chicken fingers, which are breaded with gluten. And this is not a fad diet. This is, like we said, something that makes you violently ill that puts you in the hospital. And once again, if you are a diabetic and your blood sugars go low and you pass out and you cannot eat anything, it's hard to raise those blood sugars. But also, if you are a type 1 and have celiac disease and you eat gluten and your body is violently rejecting it, it's a lot. It's pretty difficult to eat anything at that point as well, to raise those blood sugars, which could make you pass out and have all of these very cyclical redundancy type complications. And that's something that, like many things, many difficulties that people go through, that you'll never fully understand them unless you go through them. Mm-hmm. And as a person, I'm just going to say a person that is a person of you, and as a person that is connected with a person that, has these complications. I don't even fully understand all those things. So it goes back again to, we never can truly understand things unless we are going through them. As somebody's person that's going through them, I can understand them more than most. And additionally, I feel like you've been, you just kind of talked to earlier about, your 12-year-old self and, somebody that may be dealing with something, it doesn't necessarily have to be type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes or celiac. It could be anything. There's no shortage of really messed up, physical things, mental things that people are going through. But I think that the second best thing to not having to deal with those things, which I guess tough shit, because it's there. But the second best thing, I'm assuming, because just from my own experience and dealing with hard things, is having a person or having people that are there. You talked about, kind of the tough love of your dad and the grace of your mom, but the strength there as well too. If I guess this is just me talking to other people of the people that are struggling. Strength is a good thing when they're having a hard day, but at the same time, the weakness, I guess, I think can be just as good. Showing that you care and showing that you're interested and concerned. And I feel like it doesn't always have to be one way or the other. I think it's both of those things. Kind of like your parents. You need somebody to say, "Hey, suck it up. You got to do it." But you also need somebody to say, "Hey, we're going to get through this, and just hold on." And sometimes, if somebody is listening to this that is, has a son or a daughter or a loved one, sometimes you have to be both of those things, and try to navigate those. And it's not easy. I will say, I take solace in the fact, and I also have rage in the fact that I can't do anything about it. But what I can do is do the best and be the best person that I can be. There's times where it's just, you just got to be there and you can't do anything. But you can do everything you can do for that person. We know we've had times we've talked about that are scary. Whether you're too high and I am driving 90 miles an hour through downtown Mansfield to get you to a hospital, allowing you to stop the car so you can peek on the sidewalk, and being, in the ER at 3 o'clock in the morning, or, I feel like my radar has been failing me recently because of the technology that you have with your CGM, your continued glucose monitor, and your pump that has been helping dramatically in those things. But I remember countless times waking up, to your damp, cold sweating body, moist, yeah, and knowing, okay, she's low, I need to wake her up, and you naturally don't want to be woken up. You've talked about how I almost used the word lucky, but it was hard work and dedication to keeping yourself healthy. But we haven't, it hasn't been peaches and cream all the time. It's not always super easy. So I guess I'm not trying to, at this point, I'm not trying to talk to people that deal with the struggles of, having a lifelong disease or a debilitating disease or anything. I can't talk to those people, but I can talk to people that that love those people. There's times you have to step it up too. And there's times that you have to be strong and you have to focus. And you have to focus on the task at hand. You have to slap somebody in the face and force them to drink the orange juice or the grape juice whatever shitty juice that they don't like at the time. And there might be times that you have to call 911 in the middle of the night, and you have to hold your shit together to at least get them help. And you have to hold your shit together, and you have to, tell the person on the other line that, I am with a, whatever it is, but a type 1 diabetic. They are low, and you have to understand what they need. So you have to learn. And you have to love that person enough to know how to help them when they need help, and to give them the care at those times, but to also give them the room when they're struggling emotionally, and do your best to just show them that you're there. It will not be easy to watch them get carried out on a stretcher while your child is asleep in the next room. But you keep the noise down so you don't wake your child until they're gone. And then you wake them. And then you go to the hospital. Because sometimes it is not about you. Oftentimes, if you love somebody, it's mostly not about you. And that's exactly how it should be. You take care of yourself so you can be there for somebody else. That's what love is about. And you do the things that you can do to help somebody else. But you also have to do that by helping yourself and staying strong. And I think that is a beautiful message that you have laid out very emphatically of who you are and what you've done. Obviously you've talked about taking care of yourself for you. But you've also talked about taking care of yourself for the ones around you. And, I don't think there's anything more selfless than that, even though it goes back into pouring your time and energy into you. But there's some people that want you around.
Regain my composure here for a second.
Not doing it.
Yeah, so I guess when I know not everybody has a person. And I guess to you, I would say keep doing it for yourself because you're worth it. But when you have somebody pouring so much of that, of themselves, into you and into your health and just all of the things, it's selfish not to give 100% of yourself. It would be selfish not to put myself first when I have a 9-year-old who didn't ask to be here. She's a product of us because
Right.
we wanted that. And to not do everything in my power to be here, to live for you and for her and for me would be selfish. And I just don't understand a life other than that. I don't. I don't know if I would do it without you and without Kai. If I didn't have a reason, I don't know. I would love to think that I have that resilience to do that. I don't know. I know that I'm worth it. I haven't always known that. I don't always think that. But I know that not choosing me is really hard too. And it brings a lot of complications that aren't worth skipping the extra steps and the extra energy that it takes to try to be as healthy as possible. And not only that, but have a little one watching, right? She knows that she came home when she was 6 and said, "Mommy, I know why you have diabetes." And I said, "Well, shit, please tell me, because I don't know why I have diabetes. That's still a mystery." And she said, "Well, Grandpa told me that your soldiers, that keeps your body safe, attacked your pancreas." And I said, "Yeah, that's right." And she said, "But they weren't supposed to. They thought that it was the enemy." And I said, "Yeah, that's, that happened." And, she had a better grasp on what happened internally than adults, that don't have a reason to know that. And it breaks my heart that she has to know what that means. But also, her and I go out alone. And if something would happen, she needs to be able to say, "My mommy has type 1 diabetes. Her blood sugar was low," right? Or her blood sugar was high. And I do not shield her from very many things. But I try to keep it at that. We were out walking 2 weeks ago, and I thought that it was a 1/2-mile trail. It ended up being a 1.5-mile trail. I didn't have any snacks with me, and it was warmer than what I anticipated. And we started walking, and I realized halfway through I was dropping significantly. And then I started sweating. And then part of my face went numb, and I started the deep breathing, trying to just keep myself calm, knowing that I still had a 1/2-mile left to walk. And I had to go back over all of that with her. Kai, my blood sugar is really low right now. We have to keep walking. I don't have any food on me right now. We're in the middle of nowhere. First of all, here's the emergency button on my phone. What does mommy have? Type 1 diabetes. Yes. What are my blood sugars? I don't know, but it's low. Yes. You wait here with me. Yell for help, right? Like, these are the things that you need to do. And it scared her. She held my hand, and we walked until we got back to the car. And, we stayed there until I was able to eat my snack and my blood sugar came up. Breaks my heart to have to do that to her at 9. but I couldn't imagine what would happen if I would pass out and she had no fucking clue what to do. Right? So it's really hard. I have to educate her. Just like I'm sure it was really hard for my parents to do what they did, but they had to educate me so that I could take care of myself. And I have to do it for selfish reasons so she can take care of me, but also so she isn't left out. She's not confused. She knows what is going on. She has seen me with the flu twice in the ER. Super sick. She doesn't understand. She just knows that mommy's really sick. And that breaks my heart. But this is life. And I hope that at the end of the day that she just has compassion for people that are going through things that aren't necessarily visible, or she doesn't fully understand, but she knows that maybe they're a little different and maybe they struggle a little bit for different reasons. And I hope that she'll think of me and she'll have as much compassion for them as she has for me. She prays for me on her little prayer list above her bed that she made probably when she was 7, 6. Mind you, we don't pray here. She just took it upon herself and does what she does from what she learned from school at Breakaway, and she just prays that her mommy is, I don't even remember what the words were. That mommy was all better, or I can't remember what her words are, but it's it's impacted her life enough to know that I struggle a little bit. And I hope that she sees that I struggle and that I overcome it as much as possible.
Well, I don't think she'll ever miss how strong you are by any means. And I think that was subconsciously, looking back on it, that's probably one of the things that attracted me to you the most, because you had that strength and you just had to. I think it's just such a key thing, that all the things you just talked about is, recognizing that everyone's different. We're all going through our all separate struggles, and maybe we can see that a little more, be a little more compassionate, and and I'm not. This has been an emotional section of our entire thing, but I think if anyone's listened to us in general, we're not all lovey-dovey, and everybody deserves all of the things. Like, that's, you got to earn them. You got to work for it. It's not easy. It sucks. But if we can be a little more compassionate to people because we don't understand them, or try to understand them, or try to express that, hey, I'm here. What do I need to know? I'd like to know more. I'm here for you. How can I help? I don't think that's weakness. That's strength. And the amount of self-strength that you have shown is will never be lost on her by any means. But I think it's just so important to realize that we're all doing this thing, whether we want to or not. So you don't have to be a dick to somebody. Don't be a jerk. Some people deserve it, probably. Yeah, but they'll get theirs. Find somebody, find a group um, find some people to be your people. And I know that that's absolutely one of the reasons why I have so much attraction to you, is because of your strength and your compassion for other people, even as abrasive as you can come off sometimes. And maybe you get that from your pops, but it's absolutely, I can see right through that, trying to be a badass. I see right through it. And the level of compassion and strength you have, I think people are seeing that. And I hope that everybody can find a person to have that with and to care about.
Yeah, so I think everyone, my few takeaways is I don't think that everyone has to be met with such tough love and that dynamic. I mean, it was extremely brutal at the time. It worked for me. I'm extremely grateful. I spent a lot of my life in black and white thinking that that's how you treat everybody. That, everybody I have talked to multiple type 1s who were just diagnosed in the office as a nurse or, privately with, so-and-so knows so-and-so, and they can't handle being talked to that way because they're different people. Just like as a personal trainer, clients don't always respond to that direct bluntness that I really want to give them, right? They're like, no, I need you to encourage me, and I need the fluff. Okay. So if you respond differently, that's fine. Obviously, when you're younger, how your parents handle it is going to shape how you deal with this disease until you're old enough to take on the responsibility as yourself. So, parents, handle it however you can handle it, but it's not going to be easy. And I promise you, you're not doing them any favors by letting things slip. You're taking the easy way out. And I know that sounds harsh because it is. And I know you can say, oh, you're right. I am not in your shoes. But I promise you, if you want the best for your kid and not what's best for you, you won't let them slip. There are times where I have to give up control and I'm vulnerable, and I hand Fred my glucometer. Oh, so real quick, I have a continuous glucose monitor right now, which is this little device connected to my skin. It's a tiny little rubber catheter or a little wire underneath my skin, and it sends blood sugars to my phone. So I no longer have to do the finger stick all the time. Every 5 minutes, I get an alert, or I can see what my blood sugar is. My husband also has it on his phone. It has been a lifesaver, and I do not say that in a dramatic way. It has literally saved my life. I can set it so I have an alert if it goes below 70, and I have it set so I get an alert if it goes above 170. You can change that. I have a Dexcom G6. It's been a game changer. I also have an insulin pump, which every 3 days I change this other device stuck to my body with a tiny little rubber catheter. And I have a little device here that I can put in how many carbs I'm going to eat and how much insulin I need. So I'm no longer giving myself injections. the two of those together have been game changers. I didn't speak to that very much, but I've had those for the last, I don't know, 7 years or so, and it has been very helpful. Parents now can send their kid to school and see what their blood sugars are, which I can only imagine is helpful. You probably hover over that thing all the time. I don't blame you. I do that too. But it's definitely helpful. But I just say that to say, make the hard decision, the hard choices now so that they don't have to have hard complications later. So that you don't have to sit and wonder, could I have done more? Handle it how you choose to handle it and stick with it. You're not a failure if you want to give up. It happens. Just know that you can't. You can't. Unfortunately, you don't have that choice. So just keep going. Hopefully, you find somebody that when you're struggling and you have to have control, but you have to sleep. You have to get rest because you've had a really hard day or a really long night of being sick or extremely high blood sugars. Whatever it is, that you can hand your pump over to your person and literally put your life in their hands. Being vulnerable is extremely difficult for me in that regard, mainly because you don't deserve to have to take that on. Also because I want you to know that I can handle it. So when you're not here, you know that I'm fine. But sometimes I'm not fine. And I appreciate you very much being able to take that over. Even when that means you're up all night long. And you're doing tiny micro doses of insulin to make sure I don't bottom out. And you are poking the bear when it needs fed. I appreciate that very much.
Well, we do those things because of the amount of effort and control and work you have already put in it. And because 20 years later, you are absolutely not without ramifications, but without serious complications. And that makes me really happy. And all of the fun things that we've done and that you have done, and I just can't help but think about all the awesomeness that we and you have been able to experience because you've done the hard work and you've had the discipline, and we have had the discipline to do the things. And so it's just,
just real quick before we end it, I have, we've mentioned the dedication and putting in the work and doing these things, but I haven't really spoke to what exactly that is, other than, taking the time to correct your blood sugar or preparing the snacks or whatever. But being your own advocate goes a really long way. Educating yourself and not relying just on your provider. Guess what? Your endocrinologist, they have not a million. They have 1,000 other diabetic patients. They have 1,000 thyroid patients, cancer patients, whatever. They have a very limited amount of time with you. And they mean well, but they can't do the work for you. So advocate for yourself. You don't even have to read a book. Read some blogs.
Quoting Dusty now?
Yeah.
Read a book.
Yeah. There's so many things that you can do. Physical fitness, everything that they say that type 2 should do, you should be doing also. You should get in your 8 to 10,000 steps a day. You should push your water. You should make sure the carbs you are eating are gonna actually provide you energy. You need protein. We all need protein. Muscle's sexy. Build the muscle. Find something that is a release for you. Maybe it's running. I fucking hate running. It's not for me. I love lifting. I have been able to find a style of lifting that does not complement my blood sugars, but doesn't kill my blood sugars. It has helped me build a body that doesn't feel broken inside. Maybe that's the wrong way, the wrong reason to do things. But initially it was to build a body that didn't look broken how I felt it was. And now it's just turned into something that makes me feel really strong physically and mentally. And that's something that I never felt before. So find something that makes you feel powerful, that makes you feel empowered. It doesn't have to be lifting. Maybe it's running or cycling or yoga. Yoga's really good because you have to have so much control and so much structure if you want to have good control. And even with good control, you're going to have a ton of outliers, as we have discussed with these lows and these highs. Like it's never going to be perfect. Let that shit go. Like literally let that expectation go, because it's not possible. And I have spent so much energy on wanting it to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect, ever. So let that go. Give yourself grace. Pick yourself up and handle it afterwards, right? Like fix the low, fix the high, and move on. But that's how you handle it. If you're struggling mentally, get help, right? Talk to somebody, get on medication. It's literally not your fault. Your brain, I read a statistic before, you probably make 200 extra decisions a day being type 1. I don't know if that's accurate.
That's probably low.
But that's I remember reading something along those lines. Like, it's not only that you're overwhelmed because you can't handle it, but literally there is a war raging inside your body. Like, I spent a long time not wanting to take anything because I thought that I wasn't strong enough, that I didn't appreciate my life enough. And that people had it so much worse than I did. So if I was depressed, it was my own fault. And then I spent years saying, well, I'm just so tired. I'm not depressed. I'm tired. And I am tired. I get fatigued very easily. But depression is a chemical imbalance. It happens. I love my life. I am happy. I also have depression. The more you resist it, the harder it's going to get. So, medication isn't the answer for everything. Talk to somebody. Find your people. I am not a support group kind of person. My parents tried that when I was younger, and that did not work. I do not feel like sitting around a group of people and discussing these sorts of things. I did not want to do that. Some people loved it. Some people made great friends, and they're probably still lifelong friends, and I am completely missing out. It's not for me, and that's fine. Find your people. If you don't find your people, do it for yourself. Because you're worth it.
Well, even though you are not a support group person, I really appreciate you telling your story. Even if I wasn't so heavily invested in it, I really appreciate it. And if you find your people, you can have really good times and really have incredible, awesome experiences with those people. It's not all doom and gloom and sadness. Life will always have sadness, but I'd rather have a little extra sadness if I can have a lot of extra happiness.
Yeah. If you can't find your people, you can find me. I am on Instagram. I don't know my handle. You can put it in the show notes.
It'll be there.
Yeah. I know I said I'm not a support group kind of person. That's not how I found support for myself. However, I do enjoy being able to have conversations with somebody, anybody going through a similar situation, whether they're older, younger. When I was 12, I had someone to talk to who was older, who had a very fulfilled life and was doing the things. It may have made things a little easier. So if you're one of those people, reach out. If you're one of those moms or those dads, reach out.
Reach out to somebody.
Yeah. If it's not me, somebody else. But no, that's a very small part of my story. Don't let diabetes be your whole life. It's not your whole story. I have a lot of other stories. I have great stories, fun things. Make it work, right? A lot of the preparation. With preparation, you can do a lot of things, and it's an extra headache. But, it makes being able to do the things super fun. Worth it. So.
Worth it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for hanging out with us on this episode.
Appreciated as always, and if you have any questions, comments, ideas, or guest suggestions, leave them in the comments after you subscribe to the channel, or visit chroniccuriosity.com to get in contact with us.
And the store, which you can pick yourself up some fantastically curious merchandise.
Until next time, that's it.